Okay, and it looks like we are live. It's my pleasure to welcome everyone to this installment of the NAF Research and Tech Talk series. It's our very first of 2022. So for those of you that don't know me, or for those of you who may be watching the recording after the fact, my name's Nick Minar. I'm the Director of Research and Reporting here at NAF. Before we bring out our guest, I just want to do a couple items of quick housekeeping and just to say thank you for joining us live here for this talk. We really appreciate your time and just really thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to join us. As always, we're going to be posting this talk and the recording of this talk to our NAF YouTube channel, to our NAF Educator Facebook page, as well as our NAF Research and Tech LinkedIn page after the event. I'll usually have that recording up about 24 hours after the actual event itself. But if you haven't done so already, please visit our NAF Educator Facebook page, as well as our NAF LinkedIn, as well as our NAF Research and Tech LinkedIn page, and just give us a follow on each of those if you would like to stay up to date, really on all things related to NAF educators and our research in general. I'm going to be dropping both of those links in the chat now, in case anyone wants to give us a follow. All right. Furthermore, feel free to say in the chat just who you are, where you're joining us from today. We want to make a small learning community while we're on these talks, so don't be shy about interacting with folks in the audience. Just so you know, if you've never attended any of these research and tech talks in the past, that's quite all right. The purpose of these talks is really to bring cutting-edge research and best practices to all of you, our NAF educators, our NAF staff, or just anyone interested in what's going on in education research and tech today. So we hope you can use the information from the guests that we do bring on to this talk series to just improve your practice, or if you're an educator, perhaps just get to know ideas about how to advance research and education space today. As such, don't be afraid to ask questions or to make comments in the chat throughout the talk today, and Stephanie and I are going to do our best to address them as we see them. Additionally, we're going to have some dedicated time near the end of the talk, about 15 minutes, for Q&A, at which point you can come off mute and share your video if you would prefer to just ask us a question directly like that. Okay, my guest today is our very own Stephanie Lapera, Manager of Work-Based Learning. Stephanie supports high-quality work-based learning experiences and elevates them as a critical component of the NAF educational design. Stephanie tracks results and outcomes of work-based learning opportunities, programs, and resources here at NAF so that we can continuously improve those learnings and offerings for our students. I've had the pleasure of working with Stephanie for about 3 years now, and she is really just instrumental in supporting our NAF team, our educators, and our employer partners in delivering high-quality work-based learning experiences. So I'm really happy to have the chance to sit down with Stephanie today and just have a chat around some of the data coming in from our Student Internship Feedback Survey. You may hear us refer to that survey as the SIFS today, but that's really just shorthand for that particular survey. So without further ado, let me bring out Stephanie. Let me get you spotlighted here as well. Spotlight for everyone. All right, Stephanie, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Nick.
I'm really excited to be able to chat with you about our Student Internship Feedback Survey. As I mentioned, that's also called the SIFS for shorthand if some of the audience hears us using that term. So why don't we just dive right into it a little bit and you set the stage a bit for us a bit, Stephanie. So I don't need to tell you that work-based learning is an important aspect of career and college readiness, and it's an experience that we hope all NAF academies and all NAF students are going to be able to participate in during their time in a NAF academy. So can you set the stage a little bit for us just by telling our audience or anyone viewing this video afterwards about the work-based learning spectrum that we hope every NAF student is going to experience while they're in a NAF academy?
Absolutely. So really it's a continuum of experiences, and it starts off with career awareness, where students can start discovering what's out there through guest speakers, career fairs, and worksite tours. The next sort of piece of that is career exploration, where students get to go a little deeper. They could start identifying careers of interest, beginning to build skills through things like job shadows, mock interviews, informational interviews, and mentoring. And it culminates in the career preparation, which is a longer experience where students really have that deeper exploration of careers. They get to practice and master a set of skills and hopefully build meaningful connections to industry professionals. And so that's really our internships. And so you can see there's lots of ways for our students to interact with professionals, get skills, and learn and grow during their academy experiences. And we really hope that they have the opportunity to participate in a variety of these activities.
Okay. In your experience, is that continuum, of awareness, preparation, and everything else you just mentioned, does it kind of follow a typical pattern? Like students maybe start out simple when they're freshmen and sophomore, when they're juniors and seniors, that's when those internships occur?
Yeah, so we recommend that you kind of start in that awareness stage to, you don't want to throw somebody in right into an internship without being prepared and having had other experiences. So we really recommend that you start off in that career awareness sort of in your ninth and 10th grade years, continue exploration in maybe 10th and 11th, and around your junior or senior year, have your preparation, which would be your internship.
Great, great. So now that you've mentioned the work-based learning spectrum that we hope every student is going to participate in for that career preparation. And it really culminates, like you said, in an internship. But really, since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic and back in the spring of 2020, NAF has also been working with our educators and with our academies to offer some internship alternatives as well. And that's actually relevant to some of the data we're going to be talking about today and what students had to say about that. So can you tell us a little bit more about what those internship alternative experiences might look like? Might look like?
Sure. So as you mentioned, in 2020, due to the impact of COVID, NAF ended up altering our internship policy to encourage students to continue to seek out these growth opportunities, even in this time when internships were being canceled. So 4 new experiences were allowed to help students achieve that career readiness outcomes and skill development that would be comparable to internships. And so the new alternatives that were added fall under clinical experiences, which were mainly to help some of our health science students, a career and technical student organization, so a CTSO project, or a business focused project that would include mentorship or business supervisor. So a CTSO project currently as it stands doesn't necessarily need a mentor or business supervisor, but to include it as an alternative, that was a requirement.
So that's a critical component to count as that. Okay, gotcha.
Correct. Also a service learning experience or volunteering with a nonprofit. And so some of the key takeaways for all of these is that the students should have a mentor or supervisor that isn't their parent or teacher guiding them, but really a business or mentor professional. And students should also be receiving feedback from these industry professionals about their skill development through an internship assessment. So just that's something we've always done in internships, and this now applies to these alternative experiences as well.
Okay, so those 2 criteria of mentorship and feedback are both a part of those internship alternatives, right?
Correct.
Great, great. So now that we know the types of activities that count as kind of that career preparation activity, let's address our main topic today, which is really that Student Internship Feedback Survey. Really a mechanism that students can participate in and that we hear directly from them. But again, from your perspective, what is that internship survey and when would a student actually complete it?
Okay, so it was created in 2020 in response to our new internship policy. And what we wanted to do with this survey was gauge if these new alternative options were having a similar impact to the internship, which we already know is a positive, impactful experience. So did we choose the right experiences in comparison to internships? And so once a student completes their internship or alternative experience, or really more accurately, I should say, on the last day of the internship as marked in NAFTRAC, so that's important, the student will receive a link to their NAFTRAC account with this survey. It's 100% voluntary, so students do not have to take it, but they all receive a link. And it's going to ask questions related to maybe how challenging they thought their experience was, whether they felt like it prepared them for college or career, if they improved on any of their skills, if they've made connections. So a variety of questions to understand their experience from their point of view, because it's really a way for the students to share their feedback and to reflect on their experience.
Great, great. And that's really important, right, to hear directly from students on these types of experiences. Is there a way, and I imagine one of the things we were trying to also gauge is just, are those internships versus those internship alternatives having kind of similar impact, right? Because it was developed during a time when maybe people couldn't go to in-person internships, or a lot of internships were being canceled. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, so as I said, we already know that internships are a really important part of this continuum. And so because of COVID and having so many internships canceled or students having to go maybe to a virtual setting, we wanted to still make sure students had the ability to seek out these opportunities. And the best way we can do that was give them more options and things that we knew they might already be doing, such as CTO projects or volunteering and stuff like that. So, but we wanted to make sure that they were getting the same impact. So it really is to make sure we're comparing these new alternative experiences to the internship experience and seeing if students feel the same way about them to make sure that they're still programs we want to continue with.
Great, great. Yeah, and I would say just in general, it's really important for us to try to do this kind of both formal and informal reflection, because I think the whole CTE field in general is still really grappling with what high quality work-based learning looks like, and COVID just threw that, for an even bigger loop in general. So this is a really nice way for us as an organization to kind of look at, what students are actually saying about these types of experiences. So like you said, we can make decisions about, are they worthwhile pursuing perhaps after COVID? Are they worthwhile pushing with the rest of the field and kind of sharing what we learned? So I'm really happy we get the chance to kind of look into some of this data today.
Me too.
So we already touched on this a little bit, but just this internship feedback survey is relatively new for us here, in that we're trying to directly hear from students and get data on their experiences. How long have we actually offered this survey to students?
So it was officially launched in August of 2020. And I would say I was really excited. We actually started receiving feedback right away. So, it was perfect timing because a lot of internships and things happen in the summertime. So when most of those summer internships of 2020 were ending, students were able to share their feedback right away.
Great. Is there anything else you want to mention before we start digging into some of the results, or anything else to set the stage?
Yeah, so, at NAF, we started actually collecting data on student perception of internships in 2017 when Future Ready Labs debuted. And so the SIFS survey was really built upon that original design. So a lot of similar questions. But this is still relatively new undertaking for NAF. I mean, still only a couple years to gather this type of student feedback related to a specific work-based learning engagement. But we felt it was very important to hear directly from students and get an in-depth look at what they had to say and make sure that these new experiences were having that positive outcome.
Well put. Let's see what they say. So now that we have kind of an introduction to just what this survey is, when it occurs, how long it's been going on, let's actually start to talk some of the data that's reported in it. So you actually sent me a slide for this particular kind of introduction, and I'll get that up on screen here momentarily. But since the survey has been available, roughly how many students have completed it after their internship or their internship alternative experience? And I'll get that on screen.
So since its launch, we've had about 924 students complete the survey, or at least as the last data poll that we did for this talk. So 924 is the number we're working with today.
Okay. What else about some of these participants?
Yeah, so just looking at some of the demographics, so as we talk about the data later, everyone can understand sort of who is responding to this. So we looked at theme. So Academy of Finance students had the biggest number of survey completers. I think it's 33.7%, followed by our AOIT students and then our health science students. So those were the three top students from academies that have completed this survey. When we go over to our gender, we see about 60% of female students to the 40% male completed this. And then we also looked at the ethnicity of our students. And so we see the Hispanic students were the largest respondents, followed by white students, and then our Black and African American student population. And so what I think is also important, as these numbers might not mean a lot to everybody, is that when we look at theme, gender, and ethnicity, and when we compare the percentage of students who took the survey compared to those who participated in internships and internship alternatives over the same time period, we see alignment. So as an example, when we look at our AOF, we see 32%, 33% of the students who completed were AOF students, and about 28 to 30% of our students that took internships during the same time period were from the AOF. So it's comparable. So we're seeing, so even though we have 924 students, it's comparable to the overall set of student data that participated in internships.
Great. This is a really nice breakdown, and we can see, exactly who's been responding since the survey has been open. I'm a little surprised. Well, maybe not that surprised to see that Academy of Finance is kind of our most prevalent theme, but I guess we do have the most academies in the finance theme. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, great. I'll leave this demographic form here up just for the audience here for another minute or two. But now that we know who has actually responded to the survey, let's just dive in and see what types of career preparation experiences those students are actually doing. So can you give us a sense of what that breakdown is like? Like, are students doing internships? Are they doing those alternatives we talked about? What are they actually participating in?
Absolutely. So really, we have all 5 experiences were represented in some way. So internships are still accounting for most of the survey respondents. About 68% of the survey respondents participated in an internship. And then those CTSO projects were the next largest at 11%. So there's a big gap between sort of the internships and the alternatives. But that, was really just, this was a new experience for students. Something else our educators were working on. So I'm not surprised that still most of the respondents come from an internship. And then our service learning projects had the least student feedback with 4.4%. And then the other 2 kind of were right in that 5 to 10% range.
Okay. We have a question here from Ms. Carla Kiefer, and she's asking, what finding in the survey so far has been most surprising to you, either maybe in the demographics or the type of activities students are participating in? Did anything kind of jump out to you as being surprising?
Not so what we've talked to so far, but I love that you asked that question, Carla, because the next thing I was going to talk about was actually to my biggest surprise, and that was related to, we also asked students whether they were in person or virtual, because we know that was a very big part of this, right? We know so many of our internships were being canceled or being converted to virtual internships, and I was actually surprised to see that the majority of these experiences were still in person compared to virtual. So that actually surprised me as a part of a piece of data. But it's great that students were still able to get that in-person experience.
Yeah, I imagine those in-person experiences maybe were on the rise in this most recent school year, like 2021, 2022, maybe not so much last year, but yeah, you said about 62% of the experiences were in person?
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah. So
let's talk, I'm going to stop sharing this really quick. Let's talk a little bit about what students are actually saying about their experience. I had the privilege of seeing this survey, in preparation for this talk, and really I saw that the second question on that survey is just directly asking students, how satisfied were you with the experience? Can you tell us a little bit about what those data look like, or were there any differences as a function of internship versus internship alternative, or anything like that?
Yeah, so as if we look at this survey as, if we wanted to sum it up as one question, I think this is a really great question. And so to my enjoyment here, an overwhelming majority of students, 95%, said they were satisfied with their experience. And that's when we looked at sort of all experiences together. So that's a great number, really almost as high as you can get it, right? But this was true even when we really compared across experiences. With the clinical experience was a slight outlier with an overall satisfaction of 90%. But again, not far off from that overall 95%. So.
Okay. So if I'm hearing you correctly, overall very high level of satisfaction, up above 95%, and then perhaps a little lower on those actual clinical experiences. Any idea on why that might be the case, or any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I can only speculate because we didn't actually specifically ask, but it's possible there's some misalignment maybe between a student's career interest and the actual fieldwork required in a clinical experience. So just because they're an AOHS student doesn't necessarily mean they want to go into clinical work, but that might have been an opportunity for them. And often the other thought I had was that it could possibly be the lack of payment. Most oftentimes clinical experiences are unpaid. And so, that's something that students think about when they're doing work. So
Dee is asking a question here in the chat saying, what are your thoughts on perhaps requiring NAF students to complete this survey, that internship feedback survey, in order to get credit, I think, for their experience? Any thoughts on that so far, or kind of just seeing it as optional so far?
I'm still at the point where I think optional is, best for the students. Internships we know are so important, and I would hate for a student to go through the whole process of an 80+ hour experience, but to not get credit for the hard work that they've done because they didn't complete a survey. But I can see in future work how we'll be pushing this a little bit more. So while it's optional, we also have not necessarily marketed this to our students. So we got a pretty good response rate considering we haven't actually mentioned it or pushed it out a ton because of all the other things going on in these times. Sure. So I can see maybe in the future we'll be doing more marketing, and then I think we'll see an uptick in students responding to this.
Okay, great. Just kind of moving on what students said about their experience. We asked students, or rather the survey asked students, to kind of justify how they were feeling about their internship or their internship alternative with kind of a free response question. What types of things were students saying when they had the chance to do a free response question?
So I got the privilege of going through all 924 of these, and I will say most students actually did respond, considering it was a free response. And some of the things that they were saying for why they were satisfied was really this first, hands-on experience, being able, sometimes it was their first experience, but being able to really dive into the work. Another thing that came up quite a lot was that they enjoyed creating solutions to help a business. So they actually got to work on projects and items that they felt helped the business and weren't actually doing just busy work, which we know is really important. They mentioned a lot about making connections with their mentors and professionals, right? So they get to meet people that they don't normally get to meet, and they, had a lot of opportunities to meet more than one adult professional. And they were satisfied because they got to learn new skills or showcase skills that they've already had. So those are kind of some things that came up a lot. And when I looked at reasons why they were not satisfied, one thing that sort of stuck out is that they didn't feel challenged, or that kind of relates to that they didn't feel like they got to help the business. They were only doing busy work. Specifically, someone cited that they just kind of filed papers. So, they weren't really satisfied because they didn't get to do or learn a lot in their experience.
Okay. Yeah, that's very much in line with a suspicion I've had, right? Where but it's good to actually have data for that now. The experience is the most rewarding, it's the most fruitful when those students are actually getting to do firsthand real world business experiences or help a business, create a solution around some specific problem and not just doing busy work. So that sounds like a good kind of takeaway lesson for some of our educators or our employer partners who may be trying to organize some of these, work-based learning experiences. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, absolutely agree with that.
Great. We have a question here from Pat Brown, who's saying, as it relates to ease of use, could students perhaps complete the survey on their mobile devices, so not necessarily on a desktop computer?
I think at this time, because of the way NAF is set up, it has to be on their desktop, but those are definitely things we're looking at in the future. As we know, students are more and more used to their mobile devices, but I think for right now, it's just NAF is mostly a desktop-based application.
Great. I can kind of corroborate that in other survey areas. We're definitely trying to make them more and more mobile friendly and tablet friendly just in general. Great questions. Keep them coming. Stephanie, as we mentioned earlier, we're hoping that the internship or the internship alternative is really the culmination of the Academy's preparation, experiences. The survey also asked students if they felt prepared to take on these types of internships or internships alternatives. What were students saying there about, how well prepared they felt?
So again, looking at all experiences across the board, we see about 89% of students felt prepared for their experience. So that's a great positive result there. When we look at each experience individually, we once again see clinical falls a little bit below the average, with about 79% of students feeling prepared before going into that experience specifically.
Okay. So yeah, students felt a little less prepared for those clinical experiences compared to a traditional internship or career and technical student organization project. Any thoughts on why that might be the case?
Yeah, again, it'll be speculation, but when we think about a clinical experience, we know that they're unique and probably the least similar to a school experience compared to some other internship experiences. And so because of this, classrooms just really don't have or rarely teach the specific hands-on skills that you need in a clinical experience. And also students are generally in this higher stress environment with the responsibility of caring for real life people, which definitely raise the stakes and is also just hard to prepare for. So that would be some thoughts on why they might not feel as prepared going into that. But I just want to say and point out that, there's so many ways we can help prepare our students for internships or alternative experiences. And we're seeing, based off student perception, our educators are already doing a great job in this area. 89, 90% is a great feeling of students being prepared. But if they're interested, we also have additional resources that they can check out that NAF has been working on. So NAF's internship preparation modules. It's a set of our 5 lessons that relate to setting goals, what to expect day one on the job, different communications and adaptability. These were specifically designed to prepare students for these internships and alternative experiences. And so we currently have 5 modules and we're piloting an additional 5 lessons that will be released later. So just another way to help students, feel more prepared for their internship.
Great. I have those modules pulled up here, and yeah, can you kind of walk us through just what we're looking at here?
Yeah, so this document is really the table of contents for all 5 of these, so it's all housed in one place. So if you have this document, which I think we can put a link in the chat, it's going to go through each of the lessons. So the first one is my story, strengths, and goals. So that's where students can, set goals for what they want to do in their internship. And then on the side, you see the bullet points. You'll see all the things that you'll learn in that, or all the resources that go along with that lesson. So this table of contents has the 5 completed lessons, and it's all linked. So you don't necessarily have to go searching for everything. Once you have this document, everything here is linked for you.
Mm-hmm. And I went ahead before the talk and just opened up lesson 1 here. So I'm sharing that here, but you can see everything is laid out explicitly for our educators or anyone who might be interested in this, with activities, kind of a learning framework, all the materials are there. Then it actually kind of dives right into it. Is that correct?
Correct.
Awesome.
So that's sort of the lesson that can walk everybody through. So, and
great.
The resources are also linked there as well. So if you don't link them from the table of contents, they're linked on this lesson plan as well.
Great, and thanks, Kristen, for linking that in our chat for anyone who might be interested in that. I will also be sure to link these to the video description when we upload it to YouTube, so if you're not on the call right now, you will still, of course, have access to them. All right, let me close that. So thanks for sharing those resources with us. I'm sure they're going to be super valuable for any of our educators or anyone in our network just focusing on internship preparation for their students in any way. Let me think. And I should mention, if you can always shoot either Stephanie an email or anyone at NAF an email if you would like that link again, we can always send it to you. Moving on to some more questions regarding student data, we asked a number of questions on this internship survey about how students felt in general about just their experiences. And one question I'd really like to focus on here was the question, let me double check it, is it asked students if the internship or the work experience was a new experience for them. Now, again, I had the pleasure of seeing some of this data ahead of time in preparation for this talk, and it said on average about 90% of students agreed that the experience was new for them. So as someone who specializes in work-based learning, how important is that for someone still in high school?
So I think it's extremely important. We know that every new experience, whether it's a guest speaker, a mentor, a worksite tour, an internship, allows students to discover something new. And so one of the things that comes up in conversation in our team when we talk about work-based learning is that it's just as important to learn what you want to do as what you don't want to do. And so I bring that up to say these experiences for our students not only expose them to new people and afford them, the opportunity to learn new skills, but these experiences showcase the many nuances of working life, right? We know that, working life doesn't always translate to the classroom. So in much of the feedback we got from students, it's often mentioned how they learn new career paths from their experience or how the experience opened their eyes to other types of opportunities their academy theme can provide. It helps them to see that it's okay to change your plans and that many of us have had multiple careers in our lifetime. And again, students are meeting people from different backgrounds or often from different geographical locations. So allowing the students to see some possibilities they might not have ever imagined. And being able to do that while in high school is something we hope can be achievable for all students.
Exactly, yeah. Really important to try to get some of those experiences in while the stakes are still relatively low, like compared to how expensive college might be, and doing a college internship, trying to get those in while the students are still in high school, just to help inform even their occupational identity can be very, very beneficial. That's great insight, and I can really corroborate that through some of the anecdotal experience that I've had just from talking to students during an academy review, for example, kind of before and after they may have had an internship. I've noticed that in general, those students who have not yet or perhaps didn't do an internship experience are maybe a little more hesitant when speaking with an adult in a professional setting, but those students who do that internship or that alternative are really much more comfortable kind of speaking with me and telling me about the skills they learned. So yeah, I've noticed that just through my own experience. So it's really nice to hear that from you as well.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see. There are some questions coming in. Let me see. Carla is asking, are the survey findings available to students in any way or perhaps shared back with the educators in any way?
So great question. So currently the survey results are not accessible to our educators or the students. And that's kind of partly why we're here today, to be able to share these findings and share what we've learned. And even though, they can't access the survey currently, we are looking into possible ways to make that happen in the future. But at this time, it's not an option.
Okay.
But we'd like to at some point be able to share this.
Great. And then D is asking, are student interns expressing the intent to maintain relationships with their internship mentors or supervisors or colleagues kind of after the event?
So we did ask a question about whether they thought that they would maintain that relationship. And I think about 80% said they felt that they would try or, agreed that they would try to keep that relationship. And so that was just a single question. We didn't ask anything free response on that, but about 80% felt that they would consider keeping that relationship with their mentor or supervisor.
Great. That's a great question, Dee. And we're actually asking something similar in this year's student survey. Quick pitch, it goes live next week. If anyone's watching this recording, March 1st it will go live. It'll be open till April 30th. But we're asking some similar questions on that survey where, did you meet a connection at NAF that you've continued or plan to continue beyond high school, either with an adult in your intended career path or a peer that can help you doing the work that you want to do? So that's very much top of mind, I see, for some of our future work, just trying to make sure students are actually forming those connections. And yeah, it would be very interesting to see how those results might line up with some of the results we get in this year's student survey, Stephanie.
Yeah, I look forward to that because I agree that those connections that students make are really invaluable, and having that social network or that professional network is extremely important. So.
Another pair of questions that we asked students on this survey was, one, was the work they were performing interesting or stimulating? And then 2, was the work they were performing challenging? You already alluded to this a little bit on some of those free responses you summarized, but what were some of the results you were seeing for those questions?
Yeah, so I really like looking at these questions together because I think it shows an interesting dynamic. So overall, 93% of students felt their experiences were interesting and stimulating, and no significant deviation across experience type. However, only 65% of our students felt the work was challenging. And I think that's important to point out because they're definitely interested in what they're doing, but they're not feeling challenged by what they're doing. And so I like looking at this question together.
Yeah, I can kind of relate my experience on that too, because we've worked together on some of the previous work that you mentioned. This survey was based off of the Future Ready Lab work when we were surveying those students and that experience. And yeah, we generally found kind of a similar trend actually, that students found the work very interesting, very stimulating, but they were only kind of slightly above 50% in the 60% for whether or not it was actually challenging. So yeah, I agree. It's really beneficial to look at those two kind of aspects together and hear from students on those two aspects, because I think it can kind of speak to the often either misconception or maybe just not knowing high school students are capable of a lot, and perhaps reinforcing that message with our educators or with employer stakeholders that we're working with, that I think they can toss a little more at the students than they may initially think if there's proper kind of structure in place, that is. Do you have any thoughts on that or anything you want to share on that point?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with what you said. I think so many times until employers have worked with high school students, they really don't know what they're capable of. We know it's a lot, especially when they've been coached and worked with. And we look at this, some of this could easily be fixed when supervisors and interns have regular check-ins, checking in with the intern, asking them how they're doing, if, they want more work and things like that, and keeping that open line of communication during the experience. And it's important that we remember, this is why I like them together here, is that if we remember students find the work interesting and stimulating, so you have that initial buy-in that you need from the students and their interest is there to learn more. So it's important that our employers, keep that line of communication and check in with them so that they can start building more challenging work if they didn't start off too challenging. There's always time in the internship to, make it more challenging for them.
Yeah, I'm actually recalling now, kind of off the top of my head, it was a national survey that surveyed students and if they found their schoolwork interesting and stimulating, and the numbers were actually quite low, right? So it's an interesting contrast that they would find work-based learning experiences very, very interesting and stimulating, but maybe not as challenging as they could be. So yeah, something to keep in mind, that maybe this is an avenue that students could be pushed, or educators should feel, encouraged to push their students a little further or a little harder than they may normally in a classroom even. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
So moving right along, another question on the survey that I thought was particularly important, and you actually already addressed it a little bit already, is we asked if the internship or the internship alternative, if students just got the opportunity to work with others that had different backgrounds from them. I can again say kind of anecdotally on academy visits that some students have indicated that perhaps prior to an internship they maybe didn't leave their own city or leave their own neighborhood and didn't really have the opportunity to work with individuals from different backgrounds than them. So this is an item that struck me as being very important when broadening students' experiences. How were they responding to that kind of question on this survey?
So about 92% of the respondents said they did get to work with people from different backgrounds than their own. We know some of this is due to that virtual environment because now interns are working with people in different cities and time zones. But I think it's also important to acknowledge it's due to giving students new opportunities and allowing them to expand their circle, which in high school we know can be somewhat small, right? It's generally their teachers, their other students, and their family. One student wrote that being put in an environment that I wouldn't normally was the best part because I was able to branch out and make important connections with people I wouldn't have met otherwise. And so it's kind of, I want to tie it back to what we talked about, just that professional connection. Whether students are connecting with professionals from their same background or not, it's more valuable than they might realize. And one of the we read an article from Julia Freeland Fisher, who I think actually did a research in Tech Talk maybe last year, and she had
Friend of the
published.
show.
Yeah, so she had published a report that said upwards of 80% of jobs are filled through personal or professional connections, which is huge because in that same article, she writes that 70% of jobs aren't even published publicly. So people need their professional network to even learn about jobs. It's not necessarily these connections are getting them the job, they're just getting them the opportunity to apply. And so we know our students can be qualified or are qualified, but they can't apply for a job that they don't know exists. So I really love that students are beginning to work and connect with various professionals and that they're seeing that that's happening. You know, they're making a note of that. So I think that's important for them.
Definitely. I see some folks typing in the chat. We'll try to address questions once we see them coming up. But yeah, feel free to drop any questions that may be coming up here in the chat. We'll also have some Q&A here pretty soon. But let's keep pushing on for now, Stephanie. Two important kind of impact questions that are on that survey that I'd like to just get your thoughts on here. One was, did the student feel like the experience helped them prepare for college? And the second is, did the experience help them prepare for a job kind of in their desired line of work? What were students saying there?
So in terms of preparing them for college, we see about 87% agreed with that statement. And about 94% agreed that it felt prepared for a job. And that's something we should expect, right? We know that these experiences are more job and career focused. And so they're designed to learn new skills related to specific careers. So we expect to see that they felt more prepared for a job than they did for college through this type of activity.
That's wonderful. Yeah. And again, I can say those data kind of mirror what we've seen in other data sources directly from students, like the annual student survey. Oftentimes, those work-based learning experiences help them feel very confident to tackle challenges related to their career of interest, like finding a job or working in that career space. Often, it also benefits them for college, but not often quite as high as it does for that career. So yeah, just mirroring, it seems like students are providing, similar information through multiple channels. That's really great. Let's see. Kirsten is asking, a lot of this data reinforces how professional relationships open doors and then also open students' eyes to different people's perspective. Oh, sorry, I guess that's not a question, but just kind of reinforcing that. Great. Let's talk about some of the skills students indicated they were learning. There were a number of career-ready skills that we asked students about on this survey, things like speaking with adults and coworkers, or making and giving presentations, or working remotely with others, very relevant in today's workspace, or writing professional emails. We asked students to indicate their level of comfort with these kinds of activities and skills as a result of their internship or internship alternative. What were they saying there?
So overall, we're seeing students are comfortable with all the skills that you mentioned, but I'll sort of point them out individually here. 97% of students felt comfortable talking with adults. And this kind of goes a little back to what you were saying in your experience with quality visits, right? Students that have had these experiences tend to feel more comfortable with adults because they have that practice. One student actually commented that their experience helped them overcome the struggle to speak with strangers and become more comfortable talking with others. You're sort of forced to talk to strangers in sort of an internship work environment. 82% of students felt comfortable making or giving presentations. And I'm not concerned with this as only 82% because not necessarily all experiences have the opportunity for students to give a presentation. They're not all set up that way. So that number would be higher if every experience required a presentation, but it doesn't. So 88% felt comfortable working remotely. I'm pretty happy to see that. We know remote work is probably here in some way, shape, or form for the foreseeable future. So it's nice to see our students have adapted well and feel comfortable should they need to do this in any of their future experiences. And about 91% felt comfortable writing professional emails. So we know skill development is a huge part of the internship experience. So it was really great to see so many students felt their skills were developed. And there were many skills we asked about. We also asked about some soft skills like communication and collaboration and problem solving and things like that. and all felt overwhelmingly that their internship experience has improved those skills.
Wow, that's great to hear. Overwhelming, huh? That they felt like their skills were growing.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Really just highlights the importance of the educators' work, of our corporate partners, corporate stakeholders, and trying to provide these kinds of opportunities, and really just the great work they're already doing in providing these opportunities. Why don't we shift gears a minute here, and I will open up the mic channel and the camera channels for all attendees. If you want to come off mute, ask a question, come on video, ask a question, feel free to do so. We have about 12 minutes left in the talk, so we want to be sure to provide that avenue. If anyone has a burning question they'd like to ask Stephanie, we can feel free to do that now. Give folks just a second to kind of think about their questions. Maybe one more question for you, Stephanie, while folks are formulating their thoughts if they want to come off mute. We offered students the chance to tell us about what the most significant part of the experience was for them, particularly what impacted them the most about this internship or this internship alternative. What were they saying in response to that question?
Sure. So I kind of tried to narrow it down to about 4 different buckets as I was going through and really seeing themes of things they were saying. And so the first thing I would say is most significantly was learning about and seeing multiple career possibilities. We kind of talked about this a little bit, but because they got to work with people from all different departments, students were able to see and connect different career paths, which is really important because just because students are in a certain pathway doesn't necessarily mean that's, the pathway they want to go on. There's various reasons why they can be in a specific pathway. So getting them or allowing them the ability to see all types of career possibilities within organizations was really important. Skill development, we've touched upon this multiple times today. Students were really happy to be able to learn new skills. They're seeing that they're learning new skills through their experience. And sometimes they mentioned the opportunity to showcase the skills they had. And these are some of the soft skills like communication and collaboration, but more technical skills of coding and graphic design were also mentioned. So we see skill development. The third bucket is, again, a theme we've seen is this connecting with adults. So many students mentioned the support they received from their mentors or supervisors, which were more in-depth support, but also some of these quick connections that they made with just other employees, maybe through little collaborations on projects. And finally, the fourth bucket was being of value to the company. Again, mentioned this before, students really want to know that the work that they're doing is beneficial. They weren't satisfied when they were just filing papers. They were most satisfied when the project they worked on mattered and that they felt they were important, and they would work even harder knowing that their work mattered to their boss or their employer. So those are sort of the 4 buckets of things that I saw as what made it most significant to them.
Great. Yeah, I mean, that all sounds just wonderful. Doing work that's meaningful, gaining new skills, gaining confidence in one's own ability, showcasing current skills, and just kind of developing that sense of what a student may want to do after they graduate high school. I love all of that. Really insightful and just kind of reinforcing a lot of things we've already suspected, internally and throughout the field. Wonderful. Any questions from the audience or anything you want to ask Stephanie about? If not, we don't mind ending a couple minutes early. We feel like we've kind of run through everything we wanted to talk about, but want to make sure you have an opportunity to ask any questions that may be coming up on your end.
I'll jump in.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Kathy Hughes from AIR. Hi, guys. Good to see you. It's been really interesting. And just to follow up on what you've been talking about, I mean, of course, everybody wants to feel that they have value, right? Everybody wants to feel valued. That's just human, so it makes perfect sense. But my question is about the placement process. Just wanted to learn a little bit more about, are students choosing the internships or are the employers choosing them, and how might that placement and matching process be related to some of your survey findings?
I think that's a great question. So it really varies across the network. So often, depending on the program, with some of our national partners, like say Future Ready Labs, certain locations get an opportunity to apply and are our partners choose those students based off interviews and things like that. Sometimes locally, it's really dependent what's available. So that definitely has a place in what they might be and how they might be responding, because they might be in an internship that's not related to either their theme or something they're excited about, because it's just an opportunity that's available to them locally, or, you know, however it works out. But we're still seeing they enjoyed their experience, right? Or they were interested regardless. So I think that's a good takeaway, that they're still happy to be learning these new experiences, even if it maybe doesn't align to their theme or interest.
Okay.
Yeah, it would definitely be interesting if we started kind of collecting some data on that matching process and seeing if it related to satisfaction or skills, you know, or engagement in any way. I imagine it would, but yeah, that's a very empirical question, but it'd be interesting for sure just to see how it all plays out. Do you have any suspicions on, Kathy, on how that might be related, or has your research shown any of that?
No, I don't know that I have any suspicions about it. I mean, I wondered, because I wasn't sure if employers are sometimes making that choice. Like, do employers sometimes interview, you know, a handful of students and then choose one based on their own criteria? Just kind of, what are the criteria that go into this? Or, as you said, sometimes it's, you know, it's, you've got to work with what you can get, right?
It looks like
definitely different across the network. I'm just saying it's definitely different across the network on how students are placed in internships. So
yeah, I bet. Yep.
Yeah, Brooke is saying in the chat, to your point, Kathy, clinicals and like clinical experiences, I think in particular, are often part of their course credit and may not be something that they're ultimately interested in pursuing, but still kind of counts as that work-based learning preparation component. That makes sense. Thanks, Brooke.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Kathy. Any other questions? I see some folks typing, or anyone want to come off mute and share your thoughts? Placement and selection experience would be an interest. Yeah, totally agree, Dee. Like, I think, yeah, if we can definitely do that, we should. Stephanie kind of mentioned this survey, the internship survey, is kind of like on the fly right now. You know, not necessarily widely publicized, but kind of just examining the data informally, you know, to get a sense of what might be some good next steps for either us as an organization or as a field moving forward in education research. Well, I won't belabor the point if no one else has any questions they wanna ask us. But Stephanie, is there really just anything else you'd like to kind of put forward, either for anyone on the call or for the educators, and just anything regarding what we may have learned here, or what's on the horizon for you and your team?
yeah, so just a couple things. So I just want to say that, you know, all of this data that we're taking is really helping NAF think about how we support the planning and implementation of high quality work-based learning experiences in the network, and not just internships, but all the work-based learning experiences I talked about. Because over and over again, we see students are really focused on how these experiences shape their career interests, how they develop their skills to be successful, and how they're forming connections with professionals to help them navigate next steps. So we really are looking at this data, and it's not just, you know, I mean, I love data. It's not just for fun. We really are looking at how we can use this to support our network. As far as the survey goes, you know, what we learned were things that already supported what we know at NAF, and that students benefit from interacting with professionals, learning new skills, and being exposed to a variety of careers. It was just really nice to see that from the student's perspective and not assuming that that's what they want or that's how they feel. So that was, you know, really nice. And as far as exciting things on the horizon, so the work-based learning team in NAF are piloting a work-based learning participation and impact tracker that's going to allow districts and their academies to track all of their work-based learning experiences in one place, including sort of assigning students that are participating to that activity. This pilot is also seeking to gather student feedback after each work-based learning experience through short surveys that are similar to what we talked about today, but on a much smaller scale, to get that student feedback on all of work-based learning activities. And so these pilot schools are using this tracker tool to not only see the gaps in the types of work-based learning experiences being offered, but also allowing them to examine equity in work-based learning participation, because now we have students attached to the activities. And through those short student feedback surveys, educators are also going to be able to gauge students' perceptions of the activity and the impact it's having. So we're really excited about this. So far the pilot participants really loved the tool. They like having everything in one place. So we're excited to see what comes from this, but look for more details, and we should be releasing the tracker at NAF Next this year. So more to come on that.
Great. Great. That kind of naturally segues to just a resource I also want to put out there that was shared with me just the other day with another friend of the organization from the Education Development Center. They just came out with something very relevant to what Stephanie was just talking about in a work-based learning data collection toolkit. So maybe we'll try to have Catherine Shields again on the show for another talk to try to take us through some of this, but I wanted to just kind of share with the audience that a lot of this work that Stephanie and her team are doing are very much a hot spot right now currently in education research and trying to get quality work-based learning experiences documented for students so that, we can work with schools and schools can work with employment partners to just try to provide those really good experiences for students. Any last words, Stephanie, before we call it quits for the day? Thank you again for your time today and joining us, and this was really informative.
No, thank you for having me.
Great. All right, thanks everyone. And like I said, I'll try to have the recording up on our YouTube channel as well as our NAF Educator Facebook page within the next 24 hours or so, and all the links we mentioned here on the talk will be present there. But again, have a good day, and thanks again for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Yeah, have a good one.
Bye.